The De Luca estate had never felt empty. Even in the dead of night, it lived, with guards pacing beneath dim lanterns, with radios murmuring coded phrases, with engines idling just beyond the gates. Tonight, it felt like a grave. The black armored SUV slowed long before it reached the entrance. Inside, Isabella De Luca sat motionless. She hadn't planned to return tonight. The schedule said tomorrow morning, public, expected, controlled. But instinct had whispered otherwise. Instinct had saved her life more times than loyalty ever had. The gates opened late. Not locked, just delayed. Isabella noticed. Her fingers tightened slightly around her clutch. When the vehicle stopped, the driver hesitated before opening her door. That hesitation told her everything. As her heel touched the gravel, the night air felt wrong, too still, too thick. She straightened her spine, lifting her chin. She was the Mafia Queen. Fear had no permission to touch her. Then a hand closed gently around her wrist. Not rough, not panicked, controlled. She turned sharply. Luca Romano. Her bodyguard. Her shadow. A man trained never to touch her unless absolutely necessary. His eyes were darker than usual. His jaw tight. He leaned in so close his breath brushed her ear. His voice barely existed. Stay silent. She frowned. What? His grip tightened, just slightly. Please, he whispered. Don't speak. Don't react. Don't ask questions. She studied him. In 6 years, Luca had never begged. And whatever you hear inside, he continued. Pretend you already knew. Her heartbeat slowed, the calm before violence. Luca, she said quietly, what did you do? He shook his head once. This isn't about what I did. Then, softly, it's about what you're about to see. He released her wrist and stepped half a pace ahead of her, a shield pretending not to be one. As they walked toward the mansion, Isabella cataloged everything. 2 guards missing from the West Wing. 1 camera is light dark. A car is absent from Marco's old parking space. Her husband's space. The man she buried. The doors opened without announcement. No staff waiting. No greetings. Silence swallowed her whole. Her heels echoed too loudly against marble. The house smelled wrong. Fireplace smoke. Cologne. A scent she knew by heart. Her stomach tightened. Where is everyone? She murmured. Luca didn't answer. Instead, he subtly shifted again, blocking her from the grand staircase. That was when she heard it. A low chuckle. Male. Familiar. Coming from the study. Her blood turned cold. No, she whispered. Because dead men didn't laugh. And if they did, the world was about to change. 6 months earlier, the city had burned. Marco De Luca, Mafia King, had died in this very house. Shot twice in the chest. Once in the head. That was the official story. Isabella remembered the blood. Remembered kneeling beside him as sirens screamed in the distance. Remembered how his eyes looked empty, unfinished. The funeral had been public. Necessary. Rain fell like judgment. Men whispered behind umbrellas. Women dressed in black measured her strength by how steady her hands were. She didn't cry. Not once. When the coffin lowered, she placed her ring atop it. Not in surrender. In warning. That night, the tests began. Territory challenges. Assassination attempts. Loyal men are suddenly growing ambitious. They expected her to collapse. She executed the first traitor herself. A clean shot. No hesitation. That was when the city understood. Isabella De Luca was not a widow. She was a ruler. And Luca was always there. silent, watching, protecting. Once, he caught poison before it reached her lips. Another time, he took a bullet meant for her shoulder. He never spoke of it. That was Luca. So when he wouldn't meet her eyes tonight, something inside her cracked. They stopped outside the study. The door stood slightly open. Firelight spilled into the hallway. And with it, a voice. Calm. Controlled. Male. The voice she once fell asleep listening to. Her heart pounded painfully. That voice, she whispered. Luca swallowed. He was never gone. Her hand shook for the first time in 6 months. She pushed the door open and stepped into a past that refused to stay buried. Isabella stepped slowly into the study. The floorboards creaked under her heels, each sound echoing through the vast room like a gunshot. The air smelled of firewood and faint cologne, an aroma that made her stomach twist. And there he was, Marco De Luca, alive. Sitting casually in the chair she had once called his throne, the man she thought was dead smiled at her. The kind of smile that could ignite a room or burn it to ashes. Calm, calculated, unshaken. Her mind raced. He's impossible. He should be dead. I buried him myself. The pistol hidden under her coat felt heavier than usual. Instinct told her to pull it. Her body screamed to react. But Luca's hand on her wrist stopped her. Gentle, firm, protective. Warning. Don't, he breathed. Marco's smile widened. Still protecting her, he said softly to Luca. Then he turned his gaze toward Isabella, his eyes cold, assessing, like a general inspecting a battlefield. Isabella's voice trembled slightly. How? How's this possible? Marco stood slowly, each movement measured, deliberate. He was alive, breathing, unscathed. You buried a version of me, he said. Her fingers tightened on her coat. You used me. Marco tilted his head, almost amused. No, I refined you. He explained, calmly, meticulously, the plan that had kept her alive while testing her ruthlessness. His assassination had been faked. Every enemy who had moved during the chaos had revealed their true loyalty. Her actions during his death had solidified her rule. You ruled beautifully, Marco said, voice low. Even without knowing you were ruling for me. Her stomach sank. Betrayal, anger, shock, and a flicker of pride surged simultaneously. You tested me, she demanded. You let people die just to see if I was strong enough? Marco took a step closer. You weren't ruling alone. You were the weapon I wielded. Her blood boiled. I'm not your weapon. I'm your queen. I survived while you hid in the shadows. Marco's lips curved into a smile, calm, cold, controlled. Exactly. That is why you're my queen. Not my widow. Not my subordinate. My equal. Luca shifted subtly, his eyes darting between them. His loyalty, his secret devotion, weighed on him. Isabella's pulse raced as the room seemed to shrink around her. This was never about you, Marco continued. It was about control. About ensuring the De Luca empire never falters. And yet, Isabella said, voice steady, you underestimated me. Marco paused. The weight of her words hit him. Perhaps not entirely. But I did not foresee your growth. He gestured to Luca. And yet, he remained loyal. To you. More than he ever was to me. The room was silent, tense, the kind of silence that screams before action. Isabella studied them both. She realized, slowly, that her empire was hers not because of Marco's schemes, but because of her own strength. And for the first time, she allowed herself a subtle, dangerous smile. Isabella turned slowly toward Luca, her body tense but controlled. "You knew," she said quietly, almost a whisper. Luca did not immediately reply. His jaw tightened. He stared at the floor, then up at her. "Yes," he said finally, voice low, deliberate. "I knew." Her heart clenched. "How long? How much did you let me endure without a word?" "From the beginning," he admitted. "From the moment you inherited this empire. I protected you. Always. And I obeyed him, but I always chose you." Isabella's mind spun. She had trusted him completely. Loved him, though she had never admitted it aloud. And yet, in silence, he had been acting. Acting to protect her, acting to serve Marco, acting to choose her life over his own. You chose me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I did," he said. His eyes met hers for the first time with raw honesty. "Even when it cost me him. I risked everything, knowing the price I would pay if he found out." Tears threatened to surface, but Isabella refused to show weakness. "Not here. Not now." "You were supposed to obey him," she said, voice sharp but controlled. "You were not supposed to feel loyalty to me above duty." Luca knelt slowly before her. "My queen," he said solemnly. "I was always yours. Even when I had no choice. Even when it could have cost me everything." Isabella's pulse quickened, but she held her composure. Power was in control. And right now, her empire, her life, depended on that control. Marco, standing in the shadows, observed quietly. He said nothing. He didn't need to. Luca's kneeling was a statement. A declaration of allegiance. "You protected her," Marco said finally, voice low, almost approving, almost warning. "And yet, you disobeyed me." "Yes," Luca replied. "Because I choose her." The room was silent again. Heavy. Charged. Dangerous. Isabella realized that this moment, this tension, was a turning point. Not only for the De Luca empire, but for herself, for Luca, and for Marco. She was no longer a pawn. She was no longer a weapon. She was the queen. And anyone who underestimated her would soon pay the price. Isabella's mind raced. The air inside the study was thick, almost suffocating. Marco's calm, measured presence made the room feel like a battlefield. Every breath, every subtle movement, was a test. "You have a choice," Marco said quietly, almost conversationally, but the weight behind his words pressed down like iron. "Rule beside me, or watch everything you built crumble." Isabella's heart pounded. The empire she had fought to protect, the allies who had pledged loyalty to her, the territory she had expanded, all could be stripped away with a single move. "And Luca?" she asked, her voice sharper now. "What happened to him?" Marco's lips curved into a cold smile. "Your shadow, your protector, is only useful to me if you comply. Refuse, and he pays the price." Isabella felt a familiar fire ignite inside her. Rage, defiance, and the thrill of strategy. She had faced death before. She had survived assassins, betrayal, and blood-soaked streets. "You underestimate me," she said, steady, controlled, every word deliberate. "You think fear will make me kneel. You think threats will break me. You are wrong." Marco tilted his head, eyes narrowing. "I've seen fear in your eyes before, Isabella. And yet, you always survived. But survival alone is not power. Power requires obedience." She smirked slightly, but only enough for him to notice. "Obedience is for those without vision. I do not obey. I command. And anyone who forgets that will die. Including you." The tension in the room thickened. Luca's breathing was controlled, measured. He had always been her silent guardian, and tonight, his loyalty was about to be tested more than ever. Marco took a step closer, voice dropping to a whisper. The city waits. The families wait. Your decision isn't just about you. It's about survival or annihilation. Isabella's eyes swept the room, noting every detail, the weapons hidden behind bookshelves, the faint scent of Marco's cologne, the way the firelight reflected in Luca's eyes. She realized this was a psychological battlefield, and she had to win without showing vulnerability. Her lips curved in a subtle, dangerous smile. I have made my decision, she said calmly. And it is not the one you expected. Marco's smile faltered slightly. The first sign of uncertainty. Isabella felt the thrill of victory begin to rise. Isabella leaned back slightly, letting her calm demeanor mask the storm inside. Do you remember the lieutenants you thought were loyal only to you? She asked, voice low and deliberate. Marco frowned. What are you talking about? She stood slowly, every movement confident, calculated. Every alliance you believe I never questioned. Every contract you think I never analyzed. I controlled them. I built my own network in silence. Half of this empire answers only to me. Marco's eyes widened slightly, but he didn't speak. He knew her too well. This was no bluff. Luca's gaze shifted nervously, understanding that the balance of power had already changed. Isabella had prepared for this moment long before Marco returned. You underestimated me, Isabella continued, voice steady but sharp. You thought I was weak, that I needed you to survive. You thought your absence would leave a void I couldn't fill. But it didn't. I ruled. I conquered. I became stronger than you ever imagined. Marco's lips pressed into a thin line. He had expected a queen, yes, but not a queen who had outgrown him in her absence. He had thought the chaos would leave her dependent, vulnerable, grateful for his guidance. Instead, he saw someone who no longer needed him to survive. Isabella walked toward the center of the study, slowly, deliberately. Every step echoed through the room, commanding attention. This empire does not belong to you. It never has. It belongs to whoever dares to claim it. And I have claimed it. Marco finally spoke, voice low, tinged with both admiration and warning. You have become dangerous. More than I anticipated. More than anyone anticipated. She stopped, turning to Luca. You see, loyalty is not given, it is chosen. And power is not taken, it is earned. The question now is, who will follow me willingly, and who will face consequences for their disloyalty? Luca knelt before her silently, confirming his allegiance without words. Marco watched, a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. The queen he had thought to test had grown beyond his control. You were never just a pawn, she said, voice firm. You thought you could guide me. But I've learned your games, your tricks, your manipulations. And now, the game is mine. The fire crackled behind them as the weight of her words settled. Isabella's eyes met Marco's, and in that silent exchange, the balance of power had irrevocably shifted. She was no longer merely surviving. She was ruling. The study was silent except for the fire crackling in the hearth. Isabella stood tall, surveying both men. The weight of her empire, the loyalty of her people, and the power she had earned pressed down on her shoulders, but she carried it effortlessly. Her eyes fell on Luca. He had always been her silent guardian, her shadow in a world of betrayal. Yet tonight, she needed a choice to be made public. Not in whispers, not in secret, but openly. Luca, she said, her voice calm, resonant, commanding. Your loyalty will be tested here. Not because I doubt you, but because the world will watch. Your choice will determine the balance of power. Luca's eyes flickered between her and Marco. He had always served Marco, obeyed orders, followed every command, but his heart had never wavered from Isabella. "I will kneel," he said finally. But it wasn't to Marco. His body shifted to bow before Isabella. Marco's eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger crossing his features. "You disobey me," he said quietly, almost a growl. "Yes," Luca admitted. "Because I choose her. Because I choose loyalty where it matters. Because I will not serve tyranny over honor." Isabella's chest rose and fell slowly, controlling the rising surge of emotion. She reached for his shoulder, a subtle but firm gesture. "You have made the right choice." Marco stepped back, silent, calculating. He had underestimated both Isabella and Luca. Their bond, forged in blood and loyalty, was stronger than he had anticipated. Isabella turned to Marco, her gaze unwavering. "This is the way it will be. You may remain, but the rules have changed. I will not be controlled, manipulated, or used again. The Empire answers to me first. You will adjust, or you will leave." The room hung in a tense silence. Every second stretched like a wire pulled tight. Marco finally exhaled, slowly, the corners of his lips curling into the faintest acknowledgement of respect, or perhaps acceptance. Luca rose, standing behind Isabella, unwavering. The silent declaration was clear. The Queen had secured her shadow, and he had chosen her freely. Her power had been tested tonight, and she had emerged unbroken. She had proven that loyalty could not be commanded, it must be earned, chosen, and respected. Dawn light spilled through the tall windows of the study, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Isabella stood at the center, her silhouette framed by firelight and morning sun, a figure of absolute authority. She had survived Marco's return, tested Luca's loyalty, and asserted her dominance over the Empire. But the work was not yet complete. "The rules have changed," she announced, her voice calm, unwavering. "No one will betray me without consequence. No one will hold power over me without my consent. And anyone who challenges the order will be removed, permanently." She moved through the room deliberately, reviewing her empire in microcosm, the fire that burned, the papers on the desk detailing territories, contracts, and alliances, the faint scent of Marco's presence still lingering. Every element was hers to command now. Marco approached her slowly, hands raised slightly in a gesture of acknowledgement. "You have grown stronger than I imagined. Perhaps stronger than me." Isabella studied him, expression unyielding. "Strength is not measured by fear, Marco. It is measured by control, foresight, and the loyalty that comes willingly. You underestimated both." Luca stood silently behind her, his loyalty absolute, his choice irrevocable. Isabella allowed herself a small, imperceptible nod toward him, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they shared. Outside, the city awaited her command. The De Luca Empire would stabilize under a queen who had learned to master silence, survive betrayal, and enforce loyalty. Isabella turned toward the balcony, feeling the cool breeze brush her face. The skyline stretched before her, a kingdom she had fought to reclaim and fortify. She had returned early, not to witness the empire, but to claim it fully. In that moment, she allowed herself the faintest smile, a mixture of satisfaction, defiance, and recognition of her power. The empire would bend to her will, and the city would remember that the Mafia Queen was no longer anyone's shadow, pawn, or widow. She was the absolute ruler, commanding with intelligence, ruthlessness, and authority. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm, deliberate, and unwavering. I came home early, and everything that was ever taken from me has returned to me under my rule. The fire crackled, the morning sun gleamed on polished marble, and the city awaited its queen. Subscribe for more dark mafia love stories where power, betrayal, and obsession collide. Join the empire and witness the rise of the queen.